Delighted on this episode of Words, Images, and Worlds to be talking with Colleen Douglas. Our conversation has already been in full swing, and I'll mention a couple of titles here, and then I think we have some first loves of comics to talk about. So, Gargantuan, Nasty Pills, Titan, Apocalypse Girl being some of the works that you are known for, and we will certainly visit others as we move through the episode. So, thank you for joining me, Colleen.
You're very welcome. Hi. Hello,
Hi.
everybody out there in YouTube land.
That's right. That's right. Out there in YouTube land. So I am curious about your first loves of comics.
My first loves of comics. Well, my first love is Silver Surfer.
Hmm. Hmm.
Actually, the way I met him wasn't like you would meet your first love. Ideally, you get a comic in your hand and it would be pristine and brand new and smell very comic booky and
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
new excitement. But for me, it wasn't like that. It was my grandmother who did Saturday shopping in the
Hmm.
Caribbean, and they would wrap produce in anything as
Ah,
long as it was
okay.
paper. So they didn't really hold comics in a kind of precious esteem that we do today.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
um, I got Silver Surfer basically as loose pages, which were sort of wrapped up around ground provisions.
Ah.
They were in a basket, and I had to unwrap them. And then, of course, when I because at that point I'd never seen Silver Surfer, and when I unwrapped all of the stuff and I looked at the pages, there was this dude, and he was on a surfboard, and he
Hmm.
was in space, and my mind just was like immediately because I'd never seen anything like that, and I thought, oh my gosh, and then I got into this immediate frenzy of trying to rescue all the pages that you can find and wipe them clean so you could sort of try and put them together and see if they're in order and read the story.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which of course it wasn't in order. You could only read a part of the story.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the first time, and I think the bug happened from then. And then I kind of spoke to some other people. At that point in Guyana, we have like um, grassroots comics collectors,
Hmm.
because it was a very new thing. And so I went with my pages, showed them to a friend, and then he was like, "Oh, I have the Phantom." And I said, "Huh? The who?" And then he brought out this comic. But this guy in purple with black mask, and he was in the jungle, and I was like, oh my God, there's like a jungle character. Like, oh, so exciting. Jump, dive in. And of
Hmm.
course, the Phantom was very elegant and, he wasn't a jungle character per se, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But
The ghost who
that's
walks.
yes,
Hmm.
exactly. I
Hmm.
mean, he was there serving a higher purpose, but he wasn't the kind of character that you met before. It wasn't in the same sort of gritty kind of vein. It was more sophisticated.
Hmm. Hmm.
And after that, then my friend said, "Well, there's others, and I know this chap who lives, four doors down or whatever." So we took a trek on a Saturday afternoon, basically just trying to find out who else had comics, that we could
Hmm.
look
Hmm.
at and all of those things. Because at that time, comics were new to Guyana in particular, and a lot of it was not new. It was sort of secondhand or sent by uncles or other family members.
Hmm.
And so you get a kind of a mixed bag. There
Yeah.
was nothing guaranteed really, and nothing was necessarily sequential. So you were lucky if you sort of got, I don't know, two or three comics that sort of ran on after each other.
Hmm.
And then the third was my friend who had a box in his house, which was he had it was just this regular sort of brown cardboard box, and he put all these comics in them. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm just keeping my comics here. And I was like, oh, right. And yeah, just out of curiosity, you go rifling through them. And
Hmm.
then I found Brother Voodoo. And it kind of stops you in your tracks because you're in the Caribbean,
Hmm. Hmm.
who is synonymous with something else that you're growing up with. And you're like, they didn't think about his name and they named him, did they? Just for a minute there, it flashes in your mind. And but then when you read it, you kind of understand why, you know, and it becomes really exciting because it's now this whole new world that you had never thought existed. And up until then, you were reading sort of you were reading books, but you were reading more classical and more sort of, I don't know, scholastic types, until
Hmm.
you'd actually found something that was totally revolutionary and in many ways quite subversive as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
that was exciting to us, and it's kind of the way I found comics, or comics found me,
Yeah.
so to
Uh,
speak.
I love the way you capture that reading journey. I can just picture you sort of going from place to place, sort of anyone have comics? Anyone have comics?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
yeah. So we kind of discovered Archie comics that way as well,
Hmm.
because those were very popular at the time when I was growing up, and they came and they were very sort of small books. They were not very, they're not the size of comics, standard comics now. They were much more condensed, and they were a little thicker, and they were quite. It's quite funny. I mean, we look at it and why would you name yourself Jughead? Just that kind of stuff. I mean, you just have a whole critique about some other story that was going on. It was really fun because it was the time of really discovering stories and storytelling. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and that
Uh,
was outside of what you'd grown up with already. So that
mhm.
made it exciting and interesting.
Curious about what draws you as a storyteller, what those beats are, because you're a person who does suspense well. You're a person who brings in some of the mythic elements well. So I'm curious about those things that appeal to you most when you're telling a story.
Well, I think when I tell a story, the way I approach storytelling is I move, I don't attach myself
Hmm.
to it, because I think that if you do that, you become very tunnel visioned about how you're telling the story. And I think that from time to time, you have to sort of play musical chairs by
Hmm.
sitting in different points of view, um, from the reader to, if you're writing a comic, you're looking at the artist, you're looking at the letterer, you're looking at colors, you're looking at the atmosphere you're wanting to convey to your reader. So from time to time, when I write stories, I tend to have a musical chair moment, so to speak. How is this sounding from here? If I got this first, what would I do with it?
Hmm.
So in a way, you have to kind of apply a sort of critical analysis for yourself,
Hmm.
which some writers, it's difficult
Hmm.
because you sometimes have to acknowledge what isn't working as well.
Right,
And
right, yeah.
you sometimes also have to murder your babies, as
Right,
they
right,
say, murder your darlings.
yeah.
So
Eudora
that,
Welty coined it well. Yes.
yes, you have to murder your darlings. And that's not always easy for people, because I think that, you're very attached to a project when you're creating it. And some people they hold on so tightly that
Hmm.
it's not possible. And I think that one of my ways of gaining suspense is to be unexpected,
Hmm.
and to give the reader the opportunity to think outside of the box and think beyond the expected, really. Even if they start off in a very normal environment, I will soon move them to something that's not normal at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's part of what I do with my comics, in that, and it's one of the things that my friend, who reads a lot of my work before I do anything with it, usually tells me that I start on Earth and I've disappeared to the to the universe, which is the case a lot of times because a lot of my work starts off in a sort of a very normal feel.
Mhm.
And since I've known myself and my style of writing, I've always written what I would say is the middle book.
Uh-huh.
There's always a beginning, a history, and there's always a future. But when I write the middle book, it is completely contained in that the story is full and you know what's happening. And you also know that something has happened in the past and you get glimpses of that. And you also get glimpses of the future. So I'm one of those people who sort of, I think I've been doing it quite unconsciously at the beginning, but when you study your own writing, you start to understand that you're the person who writes a middle book,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
unless unless it's something else and you're writing in conjunction with directions or instructions. If you're writing for a third party, then they would give you, their own instructions. But yeah, tend to
Nice.
do it that way.
Nice to know yourself as a writer that well, and what you were talking about with being critical of yourself. I imagine that's not a process for those that are faint of heart.
No, because sometimes you have to scrap work.
Yes.
And or you have to retool it.
Hmm.
You have to sometimes ask yourself, okay, is this too much? What am I wanting to say here? What am I conveying here? And can I do it in a more sort of succinct way, without going around the houses? I've never been a fan of very long expositions.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that comics being a visual medium cuts that out anyway if you're sort of applying it well enough.
Hmm.
And I prefer to have very sort of clean and structured scripts. And one of my co-colleagues who's working on a project with me was saying, "I've seen your script. It's remarkably stripped down." I said, "Yes," because one of the people that I admire on script writing. I mean, there's Sid Field, who of course laid the ground rules for writing screenplays and all of these different things, which you can apply to comics in a way.
Hmm.
Um, but the person I really admire, who I feel does a very good job of writing good scripts, is John Logan.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
John Logan is, and I particularly like his horror scripts. When he wrote Penny Dreadful, this was brilliant work for me because I love it when I was reading his script. It was so clean.
Hmm. Hmm.
I really love that because it hits all the beats, but without getting into this and that and 50,000 other different things. And
Yeah.
but you can feel the menace, you can feel the energy of that. And so when I write, I always sort of strive to keep my scripts clean
Hmm.
and to leave something for the artist because you have to trust your artist. You have to trust your team that you're working with. And, if you have to instruct them for everything, then you don't trust them.
Yeah. True. True.
It's just that simple.
So speaking of that, are there particular collaborations or titles that you would point to where um, sort of a mile marker experience, sort of a warm collaboration?
Yes. Well, I've been fortunate so far with my collaborators that I've worked with, and they have been very pro people, but also they understand that I leave my script open in ways that would give them the opportunity to interpret and to add to it, which I think is also something exciting for an artist because they're not, following to the letter every detail. They can actually experiment, and the experimentation sometimes can be quite astonishing. So I really love that. For example, in Titan, which was one of my first comics that I did, um, we left it up to Wesley Manuel, who's the colorist, to color the book.
Hmm.
And Andre Stahlschmidt, who was the artist on that book, was saying, I think we're going to have a green book today, you know. And then you'd see Wesley's pages and you understood what he meant. It would be all these sort of green nuances at that part of the story. But it makes perfect sense for the atmosphere and what was happening, you know. So, and I think that when you have that, it sort of brings that extra dimension to your writing that you as a writer may not have conceived, or you might not have necessarily thought about it in that way, you know,
Hmm.
and it leaves it open for interpretation. And also it gives something surprising for the reader because, you know, they're not expecting that. So it's it's quite a fun thing to do, and that's one of the reasons why I like comics, not just for the fact that you could just have one set of any type of styling, but that you can actually vary the nuances and
Hmm.
you can convey an awful lot of emotion as well with and sort of thematic mm, feelings through it. So that helps. And I really love that about doing comics because, you know, sometimes there are just things that you simply don't need to say if you've got the right kind of colorist in
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
book. So that's one of the things that I love about working with the themes and the people that I've worked with. I worked with Hesse Scan on a book that is very close to me because it's about growing up in a country that is rife with superstition.
Hmm.
So I grew up with a lot of stories that was told either by my grandparents or the neighbors next door or your friends at school or your friend's mother or whomever it is, because it's almost like a collective kind of understanding for storytelling that there were these supernatural beings in our world and we've grown up knowing about them or knowing diabolical stories about them.
Hmm.
And it's it forms a part of our identity. It's a cultural sort of thing, you know. It's like the only thing I can compare it to, it's sort of like if you are from Finland or Norway or something like that, you'd have Norse mythology.
Hmm.
And if you are from Nigeria and you are Yoruba, then you'd be familiar with Orishas and you'd be familiar with a lot of sort of elements of storytelling, but from the point of view of these gods, so to speak.
Hmm.
And for me, the book in question I'm talking about is silk cotton,
Hmm.
and this the silk cotton tree has its own synonymous meaning for people who are from the Caribbean and that are a part of a diaspora that sort of came with um, with colonialism,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they have all of these stories that different cultures actually or different nations actually you know, sort of kept and passed on to their children and their children's children and whatever. And I wanted to collect all of those beings and to put them into a sort of a, if you like, a mythological pantheon of Caribbean supernaturals.
Yeah.
That's what I call it.
Nice,
And
nice.
I then went about sort of sort of reimagining them and then re-rendering them because what we had up until then was a lot of mishmash, and it it's not just that we had sort of imagery that was incomplete. It was kind of fearful and in some respects a bit nonsensical.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I wanted it to be done in a structured way that would actually be beautiful and would be something that you could pass on generationally to the next set of people, and they would actually learn about their stories,
Hmm.
learn about the history of our strange beings that we have in our own back of the woods, so to speak, and that they would actually understand that it is a part of their identity because the supernaturals in silk cotton are coming from 6 different nations. For example, in Guyana, where I was born and grew up until I came to London,
Wow,
um,
yeah.
so you have what is native to South American Indians, and they are Arawak nations, and which is called Kanaima, which is a kind of a spiritual being that is all about revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have other ones that have actually crossed borders in a way so that they don't just sort of exist in Guyana, but they exist in neighboring countries like Trinidad and Grenada. But it's the same sort of supernatural being. It's just that it's called something different, but the behaviors and the mannerisms and the storytelling is very similar. It's nearly the same. So I wanted to sort of curate that,
Yeah.
and that's what I did with Silk Cotton. So it comes out in English in June from Rosario Publishing. So people would be able to find out more about that then. But
Cool.
it was released originally from Leviathan Labs in Italy at Lucca in October of 2022, and it sold out. So
Nice. Nice.
seems seems people in in Italy like a good scary story or two or three, especially if it's based on what we believe to be real in our
Yeah.
world anyway. So yeah, that's one of the jobs that was a sort of a labor of love for me with Hesse's Gan, because Hesses has a very particular understanding of drawing monsters. I have to
Hmm. Hmm.
I have to say it like that. That's the only way I think I can say it.
Hmm.
And so for him, he has this really amazing talent of being able to uh, sort of picture quite well what I wanted to translate
Hmm.
and how that should look. And I think he did a very good job. Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, curious about places where people can connect to follow your work and any other upcoming work you'd like to mention.
Well, the shook behind me, as you see, if I swing around in
Hmm.
places,
Hmm.
that is from Second Sight Publishing, which I think by now quite a few people might have known about the Shook anthology, which I am the collection editor on volume 2, which is called Shook Songs of the Dark Sirens. And that is an edition that's a bunch of very talented Black women who got together that are in horror and wanted to tell horror from our perspective. So yeah, that's happening. I think the first volume will be on sale via Penguin Random House and Dark Horse. So that's a collaboration between them and Second Sight. And so it's yeah, it's that's happening. And
Love it. Love it.
yeah, so
Very cool.
that's going on. And I'm in other things that I can't say because I'm not
Absolutely.
allowed to.
Hmm.
But next year there's an awful lot of things that are coming out of the woodwork, and that should be interesting. Right now, one of my short pieces was published in Harvest of Horror, which is through Caliber Comics, and I was very pleased with that because I'm the first Black woman to be published by them in 35 years. So,
Wow. Wow.
yes, that was nice. It was a nice little history thing at the
Hmm.
end of December, Christmas.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a beautiful thing. And Yeah, I have a lot of different things that are happening all over. You can find me on social media under my name, Colleen Douglas, with a zero at the end. Generally under Instagram or Twitter. And my website is a very strange name called Z Comics, which at the time when my friend set the website, she looked at me and really will call it that, you know. But yes, it's spelled Zee and then comics is Comeeks, and it's all one word .com. So you could actually, yeah, you would be able to find me under all of those things. And I've done an awful lot of different things that I sometimes forget that I've written for. I wrote superheroes for into pop comics as well when they
Nice,
used to be
nice.
around. So
Hmm.
I wrote their character Moxie, and and I wrote another character, but that was not released at the time. So yeah, those are different things that are all kinds of things are happening. If you find me,
Fantastic.
you will definitely see an awful lot going on in my publication lists.
So
So
the
yes,
message is stay tuned.
yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I think that next year, even I don't know what's coming around the corner because there's an awful lot of things that are sort of just finding their way to me at this time because I think that people are sort of now finding out that I make comics and I
Hmm.
live in London and I'm a unicorn because next year will be exactly a decade for me in comics. So
Nice, nice. Well,
yes,
well, may the creating continue, and may
yes,
there
thank
be
you.
many more stories to come.
Yes, yes, indeed. I absolutely look forward to flooding people with them.
Well, sounds great, and I will post the website link
Thank
in the
you.
video as well as the audio. And Colleen,
Yes,
thank you for taking the time.
I'm
Thank you
happy to
for,
do that.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
lovely to speak with you.
great to speak with you, and looking forward to a conversation in the future about one of these mysterious, soon to be unveiled projects as well.
Yes, as soon as I'm allowed to talk,
Yes,
I
absolutely,
will tell you.
absolutely. Well, thank you again, and once more, may the conversation continue.
Yes, thank you. It's very nice to meet you. Hello,
Nice to meet
YouTube land. Thank you for looking in.
you.